Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, study breaks of the famous. In Ars Magica, the easiest way for characters to gain experience points in the magical arts is to read books written by skilled magicians. This means that within the Order, the skilled magicians who have written these books are the great historical heroes. Few writers are like Jack Kerouac, who, on one occasion, put an end of a roll of wallpaper into his typewriter and banged the keys continually until he had a book. His stamina was aided by a mixture of substances not known in mythic Europe. Most authors of genius work in spurts. They have hobbies which allow their minds to rest between flurries of activity. These hobbies reflect their thoughts, and so their main work can dribble into their recreations, and in some cases, this is difficult to store, collect, and study. Tycho Brahe, for example, used to polish mirrors as a hobby, which is hard to store. Others might be easier. Many authors wrote light pieces as a recreation while simultaneously compiling more serious works. These light pieces, often comedies and poems, can be modelled as commentaries on their core magical texts, using the Ars Magica rules. Even magi who had other recreations might have coded useful symbols into the preserved structures of their art. A magus who sculpts may physically represent magical principles described in the text using metaphors, and collecting one or all of his statues may make study far more fruitful. A magus who gardens, for example, may encode the secrets of mystery cult initiations into the pathways of a labyrinth. The next section is a lengthy quotation from Disraeli's Curiosities of Literature, recorded into the public domain by Jim Locke through the LibriVox project. Thanks to Mr. Locke.
Amusements of the learned. Among the Jesuits, it was a standing rule of the order that after an application to study for 2 hours, the mind of the student should be unbent by some relaxation, however trifling. When Petavius was employed in his Dogmata Theologica, a work of the most profound and extensive erudition, the great recreation of the learned father was, at the end of every second hour, to twirl his chair for 5 minutes.
Spinning in circles has a surprisingly lengthy history among people who practice magical arts. The Sufi are the most obvious example, and House Creamen has some Sufi traditions within it. There are also the labyrinth and maze-walking traditions used not only in shamanic rituals, but also within certain forms of Christian contemplation. When you're reading this magician's books, it may help to stop every 2 hours to walk the same maze or spin in the same way that the magician who wrote the book did. The choreography of this downtime practice may have separated from the text, and therefore could be sought as a separate treasure.
After protracted study, Spinoza would mix with the family party where he lodged, and join in the most trivial conversations, or unbend his mind by setting spiders to fight each other. He observed their combats with so much interest that he was often seized with immoderate fits of laughter.
Aside from indicating that there was something deeply wrong with Spinoza, this provides the following plot ideas. I can see some magi creating temporary animals and forcing them to fight each other as a way of livening up their day. Animals fighting each other is legal in virtually every part of mythic Europe at this time. Chickens are popular, bears are popular, dogs are popular. Could you get some sort of metaphor together by having animals which have mythic resonances fighting each other at appropriate times while you're studying? Even without that, I think some magicians probably get together to create animals so that other magicians attending the same party can look at those animals. The magical creation of animals doesn't require you to know every detail about the animal. An example which I'm stealing from many years ago on the Ars Magica forum, and I apologise to whoever originally came up with this because I've forgotten the attribution. Tell me and I'll put it in the comments, is that you don't need to know how the wrinkles on the back of the ears of an elephant work to be able to create an elephant. It's magic. You indicate the intention to create an elephant, and the realm of forms provides the pattern for the elephant, which is translated through your gift so that it picks up your sigil. Now, that's all very well, but how much do you need to know about an elephant to say, I wish to create an elephant? Can I merely know that the word elephant in some sense means an animal? Or is it easier if I'm aware of elephants? And does this mean that there is a benefit to me going to a tribunal meeting where other people who are also animal specialists create, at minimum, illusions of elephants and giraffes and camels and lions, so that if I haven't seen them before, I can look at them and go, yes, that seems like a good idea, and now that I've seen it, I understand the form better, and as I understand the form better, I can summon those shapes more easily. Does this provide a casting bonus, or is it something more fundamental? In the same way that if you don't know rubies exist, you can't use Creo-Terram spells to create rubies. Does it provide a foundational knowledge which unlocks hermetic arts at a level below that which is being modelled by the spellcasting rules?
Socrates did not blush to play with children. Cato, over his bottle, found an alleviation from the fatigues of government.
Ecstatic drunkenness is a popular mystical technique. Alcohol has a long history in alchemy. It's seen as one of the forms of quintessence. That is, you have the basic elements, air, earth, fire, and water, and things have a fifth essential element, the quintessence. And you could distill the quintessence out of various things, and alcohol was a quintessential element in Herbum, basically. In Ars Magica, Vim is essentially quintessence. Indeed, that's what it's called in the spin-off game, Mage. So by taking the quintessence of something, in this case, alcohol, into yourself, it acts as a purgative to remove the dross in the spirit that is caused by you being incarnate, that is, your spirit being surrounded in and maintained by meat.
Dandii, the translator of Josephus, after 7 or 8 hours of study every day, amused himself in cultivating trees. Barclay, the author of the Argenis, in his leisure hours, was a florist.
In Ars Magica, trees have memories, and people with appropriate spells can talk to them. So the trees may be interviewed in the same way other study partners, like familiars or apprentices, could be interviewed to gain information about the process of experimentation. Talking to the trees may be a necessary part of comprehending some parts of the material which the author has written, because he could have written the material in a private key that can only be deciphered once the metaphors are explained by such study partners. Alternatively, there is, because of the mystical connections which underlie the shape and material table, a metaphorical concordance between certain trees and certain mystical ideas, and the plantings of the garden could respond to that, elucidate that, to learn characters how that works in a more subtle way, to allow them to grasp more easily a magical principle.
Balzac amused himself with a collection of crayon portraits. Pairisi found his amusement amongst his medals and antiquarian curiosities, and Politian in singing airs to his lute.
We already have rules for realia collections. Music can be used for coding information due to its mathematical foundations.
Descartes passed his afternoons in the conversation of a few friends and in cultivating a little garden. In the morning, occupied by the system of the world, he relaxed his profound speculations by rearing delicate flowers. Rohault wandered from shop to shop to observe the mechanic's labour. Count Caylus passed his mornings in the studios of artists, and his evenings in writing his numerous works on art. This was the true life of an amateur.
The game already includes a tradition amongst Yarburton Magi of seeking muses, which they don't always mean literally as women. It's inspiration from the beautiful things in the world, which in the Gothic mindset draws you closer to God, but in the Yarburton mindset draws you deeper into the magic of the world, which provides the world's colour and beauty and vividness.
Grenville Sharp, amidst the severity of his studies, found a social relaxation in the amusement of a barge on the Thames, which was well known to the circle of his friends. There was festive hospitality with musical delight. It was resorted to by men of the most eminent talents and rank. Some have found amusement in composing treatises on odd subjects. Seneca wrote a burlesque narrative of Claudian's death. Pierius Valerianus has written an eulogium on beards, and we've had a learned one recently with due gravity and pleasantry entitled Éloge de Perruque. Holstein has written an eulogium on the north wind, Heinsius on the ass, Menage, the transmigration of the parasitical pedant to a parrot, and also the petition of the dictionaries.
And here we may find an answer to one of the questions that's, as a librarian, bothered me about the library design rules for Ars Magica for, it must be a couple of decades now. Why are there so many terrible, terrible books in Ars Magica? As a librarian, we don't collect everything, we collect for use. That is, the library is a tool, and this is a belief that was held by medieval librarians as well. You don't just pile up great walls of rubbish. Why are there so many summae which no sensible person would ever read? The answer could be that these light, trivial, vain summae are the recreational writing of far more significant authors, and that by having them, you can use them as ways of getting more out of the book that's got great standing and great use.
Erasmus composed to amuse himself when travelling his panegyric on Moria or Folly, which, authorized by the pun, he dedicated to Sir Thomas More. Salangre, who would amuse himself like Erasmus, wrote, in imitation of his work, a panegyric on Ebriety. He says that he is willing to be thought as drunken a man as Erasmus was a foolish one. Synesius composed a Greek panegyric on baldness. These burlesques were brought into great vogue by Erasmus's Moriae Encomium.
So, two things there. The brief works of Erasmus that he threw together as he was travelling from place to place are possibly best modelled by the epistle rules, which already exist. There may be a vast body of comedic writing which acts as a commentary on the Hermetic canon of magical writing, a sort of apocrypha for magic, in the same way that the apocryphal books of the Bible are considered by some denominations to not be as literally true as the other books of the Bible, that is, to not flow from the Spirit, but to still be useful for the purpose of study.
It seems, Johnson observes in his Life of Sir Thomas Browne, to have been in all ages the pride of art to show how it could exalt the low and amplify the little. To this ambition, perhaps, we owe the frogs of Homer, the gnat and the bees of Virgil, the butterfly of Spenser, the shadow of Wowerus, and the quincunx of Browne. Cardinal de Richelieu, amongst all his great occupations, found a recreation in violent exercises, and he was once discovered jumping with his servant to try who could reach the highest side of a wall.
This may tie into the Creaman path that sees the perfection of the body as a way of making it an apt vessel for the controlling the flow of magical energy. It also ties into Tramare pragmatism about how there's no point becoming a great magician if you are so frail that you can't be deployed to deal with real-world situations. Thanks again to Jim Locke and LibriVox. Virtually any act can be recreational, so characters with virtually any recreation can be hooked into stories by noticing odd features only apparent because they share the ancient author's interest. This opens up a new class of treasures for magi as they hunt and compete for the antiquities of their predecessors.